Hi, this is Jeffrey Kurt Financial Group. Today's Wednesday, July 2, 2025. I want to start with the year-to-date and second quarter numbers for the major indexes of the U.S. stock market. So for year-to-date, as of Monday's close, June 30th, the Dow was up 3.6%, S&P up 5.5%, NASDAQ up about 5.5%. Russell was actually down about 2.5%. In the second quarter, it was a good quarter. The Dow was up 6%, the S&P was up about 11%, NASDAQ up 17%. So again, as a reminder, the first quarter was negative for the U.S. stock market, and we had the sell-off in anticipation of the tariff news, and then after that, into the April 8th or 9th lows, and then a nice rally from there. One of the things that's happening right now is that the S&P 500 is very concentrated, like at a record level. The top 10 names of the S&P 500 comprise 38% of the index. So you think you're buying 500 different names, but you're really only buying 10 or 15 names. Those names, from 400 to 500 have very little impact, and probably even, a greater number than just those 100 have a very little impact on the S&P 500. So I wanted to point that out. Next item, the U.S. dollar had its worst first 6 months in like 50 years. So the U.S. dollar has been very weak. It's down about 11% on the dollar index. And that has actually helped the U.S. stock market in the sense recently there's been a negative correlation, and a pretty high negative correlation, I think around 80-85% negative correlation, U.S. dollar to the U.S. stock market. So dollar moving down, stocks moving up. That could be a headwind in July if that correlation stays. The correlation is going to change and probably move back towards zero at some point. But if the dollar has a oversold bounce, it could be a headwind in the short term for U.S. stocks. A couple of things I wanted to point out on inflation and tariffs in those items. Japan's car prices exported to the U.S. were down 12% in May, down 12% in price in May, and that's on top of a 4.5% price decline in April. So it looks like the Japanese auto manufacturers are absorbing the cost of the tariffs in order to sell cars in the U.S. And on a related note, it's been a couple of weeks, I can't remember the exact clip, but Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was on a interview and said that the one of the Chinese periodicals, newspapers, they had a report and they estimated that the Chinese manufacturers would absorb on average 65 to 70% of the impact of tariffs. So just two data points, but it also leads to the belief that the tariffs may not be as inflationary as everyone's been claiming and screaming. So again, it's I think a couple of interesting points. I'll leave it at that. I'm gonna won't be back until Monday with a video. Have a great weekend. Happy 4th of July and Independence Day. 249 years ago, the founders of the country signed a Declaration of Independence. For the months and the year before that, there were the various skirmishes and the separation, and it was a pretty contentious gathering in Philadelphia to get to the Declaration of Independence, and it was signed on July 4th. Happy Independence Day, and I'll be back on Monday. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.